and Anna Diamantopoulou. Thank you. Anna, nice to see you again. Pierre Moscovici, merci. Je me souviens d'avoir un petit déjeuner avec vous il y a 20 ans, 30 ans, je ne sais pas, c'était à Paris.
Ça nous rajeunit.
Merci. Hannah, nice to see you. Well, you know this message now about how time constrained we are. So when the audience leaves after 20 minutes, it'll be because suddenly their stomachs get too tight and rumbly. Anyway, the title of this is Inequalities, Populism, and the Far-Right Phenomenon in Europe. Now, none of you are of the far-right or the populist persuasion, nor am I. So this is rather a biased panel. But it is clearly a real phenomenon, not just in Europe, but you could say worldwide. And of course, if you look at Europe in itself, you have the interference of J.D. Vance in basically supporting the AfD in Germany. You have Marine Le Pen. Do you think, Pierre, that she will actually be finally, will she be allowed to stand or not?
I don't know. It depends on the justice.
Yeah.
She's been condemned not to run in the first process, but she's in appeal.
If you were somehow in the judicial system in France, what would you advise?
Never.
What would you prefer?
Never comment, never advise the judges. Well, I would say that a condemnation in a way is quite logical to what I saw. The fact to decide whether she's eligible or not is more political.
Yeah. Martin, I'm thinking, leaving Anna to last, because the ladies have to be last in this. Martin.
Change the order.
Oh, indeed.
On Le Pen, I think I launched the inquiry in the European Parliament, and I trust the French justice. I think the first sentence will be confirmed in the appeal court. So I doubt that she will run as candidate for the presidency. And on which is concerning right-wing extremism, my feeling is that the most important feeling of citizens, wherever and whenever I'm discussing with ordinary citizens, the feeling they show to me is fear. People fear the younger, fear for their future, the older fear for the future of the younger. And the problem is that an overwhelming majority of citizens has a problem to accept immediately that in our times nothing in the future will remain as it was in the past, and to adapt individually to these challenges is not easy. And the best for this long list of unanswered questions linked to this fear is to have a scapegoat who is creating all these inconveniences. And this is the strategy of the right-wing extremists. In my country, for example, is migration. The migrants are responsible for everything. If it is too hot, migrants. Trains are the migrants. Everything in the AfD is...
Wir schaffen das no longer...
their program is if the migrants would not be there, we have no problems. And my feeling, and therefore I'm listening very carefully to what was said in the panel before. One-dimensional answers are always wrong. And behind the fascist tactic in the 20th century was a political strategy. The problems exist because they are there. If they would not be here, we would not have the problems. Therefore, they have to disappear. Then the problems disappear. Okay. This is the strategy of right-wing extremists all over, especially in Germany, and therefore I'm very worried.
Okay. Now, Anna, you don't strike me as a lady who is particularly afraid of anything. But it's, Martin who brought up the idea of fear. How do you fear the way that the populist right seems to be gaining ground?
I don't know if I could use the word fear for me or for the political system, but it's true that fear is here. But it is interesting to see what is behind this fear. And here were 3 social democrats and 3 Europeans as well. And the question is, why is there this rise of far right and this decline of social democrats and I would like just to give you sometimes examples are better than analysis. I was a chair of a high-level group in the European level 1 year ago, and the subject was the reform of the social state, of the welfare state.
Yeah.
So we had the opportunity to work with all member states and have indicators, etc. We presented the report about the need of a new welfare state in Europe, and then we presented it in different countries. So we went in France, in Germany, in Sweden, in Austria. Look, these 4 countries have the best social indicators in the world, not in the European Union. And in these 4 countries, we have the strongest far-right parties. So it is not so simple to say that it is just inequalities. It is, of course it is, the poor working, it is the insecurity that young people have. But if I would like to summarize it, I could say that we have 2 axes. The first one is the socioeconomic. So we have a problem of jobs, totally different situation in the labor market. We have no real answers. There is the problem of low salaries and the problem of new
But the problem of jobs, if you look at the unemployment rates, they're not that high.
No, you're right.
It's an insecurity.
It is the nature of jobs.
Yeah.
It is totally different. The life itself has changed. The workers' rights are here, but in papers, we know it very well. This is not the situation for the young people. They work 14 hours. They don't have their personal lives. They have insecurity. They don't know if next day is here in the same way. So it is the socio-economic axis, and the other one, and we have underestimated this, it is the cultural and identical axis. And here we can see the identity of my nation, the identity of my region. The regional inequalities in many cases are much, much stronger than the personal ones. That's why we can see big differences in the vote, in the regions, and in the cities. It is the identity of the gender. It is the identity of religion. So all these have come back.
Yeah.
They were in the front page in the beginning of the previous century, and they have back. So we, the Social Democrats or the left parties, we have not strong answers, slogans, and flags, and personalities. You asked about Le Pen. Okay, the problem is what is going to happen with Le Pen. I asked the same. The other problem is who is going to stay against Le Pen? Is there a personality who is glamorous enough, who has a flag and can persuade people? So I think this is...
Well, Dominique de Villepin is pretty glamorous.
Who?
Dominique de Villepin, he's just announced that he will run.
Okay, I don't know. I cannot criticize him.
Yeah. Pierre, what do you think?
This morning I was with Prime Minister Mitsotakis, and when he asked me what I'm doing at The Economist, I told him I have a round table with Martin Schulz and Diamantopoulou, and told me that's the old guard of the good social democrats. He could have added, that's the old guard of the good Europeans. In a way, I'm glad to meet friends again. I regret that. Because social problems, inequalities, are not a problem that should be only dealt with social democrats or the left. It's a problem for everybody. And the far right is a problem for everybody. Here we are at The Economist. Obviously, it's an economic newspaper, one of the best in the world, a bit of advertising. We are with businessmen, we are with people involved in politics. And whatever are your convictions or your ideas, far right is a problem. Far right is not pro-business. Far right is not pro-Europe. Far right is not pro-democracy. And you don't need to be a social democrat to combat far right. You need to understand first what happens and then to create the good tools in order to address the issue. And there, first, we see all that far right is everywhere. We're talking about Madame Le Pen. Of course, she's a problem because France is a major country and she has been twice in the second round of the presidential election and she's quite close to power. And her party is by far the most important in France, over 30%. But if I look at the previous European elections, I see that the far-right parties were 130, that now 200, that they are over 35% all over Europe. And that is not irresistible, but that's really something which is happening. And that's why we need to understand. Understand means, first, inequalities, they are still there, the fear of decline, especially of our industry, that's a real problem for all of us, identity and cultural matters, and now you said what was right about that, and so you find a scapegoat. In the 30s it was a Jew, now it's a migrant, all over the place. And fourth, there is also an anti-globalization reflex, which leads to an anti-European feeling, because Europe appears to some people in lower classes, but also in medium-sized classes who fear to be downgraded, as too open and as the Trojan horse of globalization. And this is why we need to rethink our response. And as far as inequalities are concerned, yes, I believe that we need to address that. It's about training, it's about investment. And I think the Draghi report there is not a mantra, but obviously it's clearly a roadmap we must follow. But that also means Draghi and Letta, but I was talking about Draghi, because we need to invest. And in order to invest, we need to find the resources to do so. We've created Next Generation EU with the equality crisis. This must not be a one-off. We must find the ways to get to the 800 billion package that Mario Draghi proposes, and we must also be capable of a common borrowing package in order to rearm Europe and to defend ourselves.
But Pierre, it's interesting you bring up the point about the far right being anti-Europe, and now you can, in origins, you can say that obviously of AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, you can say it originally of Rassemblement National, BNP. But if you look at Meloni and Fratelli Italia, I mean, that's not so much anti-EU. I wonder whether the far right is sort of, maybe far is too strong a word, I don't know. Is it Manfred, do you think, oh sorry.
What you mentioned is the fact that there is not one far right, there are several far rights with different attitudes as well towards Europe, towards democracy, and towards the economy. But basically, I would say that under the control of my master, Martin Schulz, he was my president of the parliament, we must acknowledge that the far right has changed. That at the moment they were totally anti-European, wanted to destroy Europe. Now they want to conquer Europe with a more nationalistic approach, and some of them are pro-market, some of them are anti-market. Obviously, Madame Meloni is not Madame Le Pen. They're opposed in a way. I would say Madame Le Pen is more moderate on social or societal issues, but she's very nationalistic on economy. Madame Meloni is far right as far as society, migrants, judges are concerned, but she's more pro-business.
Martin, I don't know whether you had the pleasure, I must have done, of being with Nigel Farage in Brussels. I mean, it does seem to me extraordinary that if you look at political figures who are really changing attitudes and policies, in my opinion, in a dangerous way, you've got Nigel Farage, responsible really for Brexit. I mean, Boris Johnson as well, and you have, Donald Trump also being, I think, a consequential figure for good or bad in America. I mean, it's rather, the genius of populism is that somehow they communicate to, quotes, ordinary people in a way that conventional politicians don't. And that I'm sort of, in a way, sotto voce insulting you guys by implying that you are conventional politicians. But I think it's a real point, isn't it?
First of all, the pleasure to deal with Mr. Farage was limited. I share the view of Pierre. there is not one far right. It's very heterogeneous, very different from country to country.
Yeah.
In Germany, they are very extreme. They had a conclusion, a proposal on their party congress. The European Union, Europe must die, then Germany can live.
They've become more extreme, haven't they, AfD?
The radicalization of this right-wing party in Germany is worrying.
Yeah.
In Italy, it's quite clear that Fratelli d'Italia was a very small party, and Ms. Meloni, by her personal individual behavior, grabbed a lot of voters of the previous Forza Italia, which was grabbing 30 years ago the enormous amount of voters, disappointed voters from the Democrazia Cristiana. That means in Italy is near to Meloni a certain tradition, which is from a principal point of view, not anti-European. And another part, as you did, the market-oriented people in the northern part of the country are pro-Europeans. And Italy is traditionally a country with culturally a very open-minded political scene. Orban is another, and his allies are another kind of very ideological right-wing extremists, more cultural, as you mentioned. In Germany, this is racist nationalist. They are more cultural, and Meloni is a different kind of right-wing extremism. Nevertheless, they are dangerous, and therefore I think what Anna mentioned at the beginning, the progressive forces in Europe, not only the left-wingers, the progressive forces also in the center of our political landscape and of the society must mobilize for some fundamental values of Europe. Three, in my eyes. Respect for the individual, tolerance for another opinion, create together dignity in the society. And I'm afraid, listening to the panel here and before, I feel that this lack of tolerance, this lack of respect to political competitors we see just in the United States is leading to a kind of indecent development in this society, and this is dangerous.
Yeah, there does seem to be a sort of a polarization in America, which we don't actually have in Europe at the moment. Anna, I mean, if you look at Greece, it seems to me that there obviously is an extreme right, but it's a fringe party, isn't it?
No, in Greece, it is interesting that we had this terrible crisis. We had populism, we had left populism.
Yeah.
But now the far right is divided in small parties, not really very strong. I would like to continue what Martin said about what to do and what the conventional politicians have to do now. We cannot be populists. I read a very interesting article in Economist a few months ago that, look, all parties now have to be a bit populist. We cannot. I mean, we need to document what we say. We want concrete proposals. We take into account the situation. We don't say crazy things. And we see that the new media, the new social media, the new ways of communication are not acceptable to this kind of approach. When you speak more than 1 minute, nobody doesn't hear to you in the social media. Yeah. So you have to be very concrete, have concrete slogans. You have to change the mindsetting of political language we had in the past. Are we able to do that? For the time being, I'm afraid not. But if I would like to get some points where we have to work, is that, first of all, the digital era, digitalization and AI change everything. So we have to be very concrete. How is the work? How is the communication between the sexes? How is the family? How things are changed and what we're saying for all of this, and to say it in a different language. Climate change, you see that the climate change has become a tool against the climate policies to the hands of the far right. And we were not able to make it a real slogan. I will use this word. And one more issue. I am afraid that all this war economics, defense and money for defense, will be for the right-wing parties. They are going now to speak about the welfare state, about the need to support people. And I am very afraid that we focus very much politically on defense. I understand very well how important it is. But defense cannot be the only priority in Europe. We have to protect our people in order to protect our borders.
Well, Anna, you have set a challenge for us now to finish with. So you mentioned slogans. And it seems to me that the right have always had the most powerful slogans. In the English language, they're almost always 3 words. So bring back control.
Yes.
You know, so we have
Go
less
back,
than a minute.
Mrs. Merkel was Tsipras.
Okay, so this is your slogan. Okay,
very
so
clear.
each of you, now we're going to finish now with this. What is your slogan for improving matters? Martin. And actually, don't forget, Angela Merkel did have a slogan. Wir schaffen das. 3 words. So.
3 words, no.
Yeah, this is your challenge.
3 words to answering to this enormous challenge. 3
Yeah,
words.
imagine that you're trying to get.
Perhaps a message to Mitsotakis: we are the old guard, but we have the best proposals.
That's more than 3 words, right?
My proposal is the 3 words.
You had respect. You had a.
I have already mentioned it. Respect, tolerance, and dignity.
Good, that's it. Fine.
Okay.
Respect, tolerance, dignity. Fantastic. Pierre.
I would say 2 sentences. The first one, it's not politically correct for somebody from the center-left, it would be borrowed from Tony Blair. They are populists, we must be popular.
Borrowed from Blair, that's quite a good one.
They are populists, we must be popular. We need to build a popular left. We need to reconquer people who work, who are in fear. And that's why my second sentence is about the slogan. First, we must fight for our ideas and be optimistic. Second, we must empower people and institutions. And third, we must protect. Because when there is fear, you need to have protection. And that's what people expect from progressists.
Right.
So first, what was the first one? Because you've got empower is the second, protect the third.
Fight,
empower, protect. That's perfect,
and
okay.
protect.
If you stand against Dominique de Villepin, you know, it could be your slogan.
Well, I could. We're not the same guy on all matters, and that includes the matters we were discussed before.
Anna, you started this challenge, so now you have to finish it.
I think that, okay, it is not easy 3 words, but 3 areas that we have to invest. And it is work, regions, and identity.